that President Biden should visit this country.
In our minds, in our society, the President Biden, the president of the biggest democratic civilization.
And next Monday, May 9th, is a notable day, a Russian holiday when Russia celebrates victory over the Nazis. There's been speculation that Vladimir Putin might do something extreme before or on May 9th. Some Western intelligence suggesting maybe even officially declaring war on Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky tells Fox News an official declaration of war really wouldn't change much because Ukraine has been at war with Russia for 8 years.
Fox's Matt Finn in western Ukraine reports Tuesday's missile strikes on railway facilities were meant to try and stop the flow of weapons from the west into Ukraine. Fire crews in New Mexico taking a stand in their fight against the largest wildfire still burning in the U.S., trying to keep the flames from pushing any closer to the town of Las Vegas, New Mexico. That fire has burned hundreds of square miles, dozens of homes, and threatens more destruction. 15,000 homes have now been evacuated. A Texas woman has been arrested for a murder committed 25 years ago.
In 1996, Christopher Hervey was murdered in a Santa Ana apartment he shared with girlfriend Jade Benning. She blamed it on a black man who broke into the home and stabbed Hervey. Neighbors told cops they heard a loud argument inside the apartment for about 15 minutes, but the trail turned cold and Benning moved on with her life. Police say they finally got a break in the case after an anonymous letter was sent to investigators in 2020 implicating Benning in the murder. She was arrested near her home in Austin, Texas, and faces extradition back to California. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate, put cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want, with your Visa debit card. Where there's put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
Check out the newest hydro and garden center to hit Guam, Crop King Hydro. We have a huge selection of plant nutrients, soils, hydroponic mediums, organic pest control pumps, plant support, tools, and so much more. Call 635-4769. 635-GROW. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 to 6 at the Dededo Satina Mall, right across from Payless and Paradise Fitness. For whatever you grow, think Crop King Hydro. Crop King Hydro.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So here we are. So let me see. What was I going to say? Yo soy muy feliz ahora. Es porque el día es el 5 de mayo. Pero es no feliz Frenchy. Yeah, and I'm not so happy about not having Facebook. We are on YouTube, but I'm looking at YouTube, and it looks like I'm looking at a recording that instead of a live YouTube. Maybe I'm just not familiar enough to know with what I'm looking at here.
Might be a little behind.
Is that the way it usually works? Yeah. Oh, okay. So we're trying to work with YouTube, and of course you won't be able to comment on YouTube like you do on Facebook, which is very unfortunate because your comments on Facebook, I think, are a really important feature of the show. We've got such a a great group of tailgaters out there in our international radio listening audience. I really look forward to your comments on what goes on the show, but we're just going to have to tough it out without it today. The phone works. We got all three lines, right, Jose?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All lines are open.
671-888-8255. 888-TALK. And you'll be on the air. You'll be talking with the legendary Jose Martinez, who will send you to the green room, and I'll get you on the air. All right, let's start out with Zemi Kutney. On July 15, the Department of Education will say goodbye to its longest-serving superintendent. John Fernandez, who is currently the longest-serving chief state school officer in the nation, announced this week he will be leaving office to spend more time with his family. Now, let me explain what a chief state school officer is. The superintendent of education here, who used to be known as the director of education, is both a district superintendent and a chief state school officer. I think all of the states have a state-level bureaucrat, sometimes a bureaucrat, sometimes elected, sometimes appointed. Wisconsin, it's called the state superintendent of schools. He never steps foot in a classroom. He probably never even steps foot in a school. But he does a lot of things at the state level. He has a function at the state legislature. He sets rules and regulations for the schools, strictly an administrative position. So the director of education here, or the superintendent of education, we do not have a superintendent of the Department of Education. He is the superintendent of education. And so he is the chief state school officer. And then at the same time, he is the district superintendent. So in most states, there are school districts. School districts are municipal corporations. They're chartered by the state, and they function like very similar to how a commercial corporation functions. They have a school board, which is the board of directors, a chief executive, which is the superintendent. They spend money, they sue and can be sued, etc. So John Fernandez is both the chief state school officer and the district superintendent, which doesn't mean a whole lot, except if he is so inclined, he can go to national meetings for chief state school officers and hobnob with some really important folks. Okay, so going on with the article here, John says he announced this week he will be leaving office to spend more time with his family, which ordinarily means he just about got fired. You know, he was on the verge of getting fired. He quit before he could get fired. And of course, he's got to have a good excuse. Who could argue with a man who wants to spend more time with his family? I don't think that's not the situation here. I think Fernandez has a very good relationship with his board. I suspect they'll be sad to see him go. Here's a quote. "It's really bittersweet, but it's a decision I've been mulling over for maybe up to a year," Fernandez said. "It really became a reality due to just recent events having to do with my family. There are so many things that are still left to do, but I really wanted to put my family first and decide what's next for us as we look to the future." Now, what that sounds like to me is he wants to move and go somewhere else. I don't know what his family structure is like. I don't know how many kids he has, how old they are, if they're ready to go to college, if that has something to do with it. He came from Washington, D.C., I suspect with this new scalp hanging on his wall, this new trophy mounted on his wall. It'll be even more hireable in D.C. than he was before he left. He led the department through the biggest obstacle for public school students in recent memory, the Wuhan virus pandemic. Schools were closed in March 2020, and there was no clear vision as to how the community would deal with a virus that, at the time, had no means of prevention or treatment other than masks, social distancing, and highway roadblocks. Different modes of learning, including hard copy take-home packets and online classes, were devised, but not all students had access to computers and connections, and not everyone was able to retrieve education packets from distribution points. Several waves of Wuhan virus delayed and disrupted portions of the 3 different school years. During the last wave, through the Omicron variant, schools remain open for face-to-face instruction. The department is ready to go forward. The time must come for new leadership, this is a quote again, to build upon the progress made and to take the department to the next level of achievement and improvement, Fernandez wrote. Our children deserve this. In the next 2 months, he hopes to finalize the pay raise for educators and find a contractor for a new Simon Sanchez High School. For the Department of Education, the search begins for a new superintendent who can execute a recently approved strategic plan. We will need someone who has the vision, the leadership, and the flexibility to bring the department, its 4,000 employees, and its 30,000 students into the post-Wuhan virus world of education. So I know that the hagiography has already started for St. John, but you know, a little cold water here. I've got a bucket of cold water right under my bench here that I use to throw on just about any story. I remember one time a daily feature of Tall Tales was ringing up the amount that John had been paid for staying home. He was suspended with pay for a year. Some kind of a sexual discrimination type litigation that we never really found out any of the particulars about. My recollection was that the board finally caved in and settled with him, and he came back to work. Might as well bring him back to work since you're paying him anyhow. So there was that. There was a time when he publicly said, during budget time, he said, you know, maybe we ought to just be excused from the Every Child Act, the Adequate Education Act. In other words, if you can't get enough money, well, to meet the standards, lower the standards. And my official posture was, John Fernandez, you're this director, you're the superintendent. You should be over at the legislature pounding on the table saying, give us our money. We've got 14 points in the Every Child Act that we got to meet, and the statute says that the legislature will support this. And then just recently, I was very disappointed in the way he handled Rugby Boy. You'll recall that on the 9th of last month at a girls' rugby game between Tejon High and Guam Woke High School, a boy took the field. And this was somewhat controversial, and John's approach to it was, without even thinking about his Board of Education, well, we'll let her play because Title IX, we'll be in Title IX trouble if we don't, because we can't discriminate against a transgender. So he had all the right words. He had all of the politically correct statements, except he was just dead wrong. He was not only dead wrong, but he was dead wrong ultra-virus. The matter was clearly a policy call for the school board, not an administrative call for the director of education. So I'll give him high marks for hanging on as long as he did. I can tell you it's not an easy environment to spend a long term in. So I'll give him high marks for that, but I'm not quite ready for sainthood yet for John Fernandez. Okay, that's the editorial for today from the Post. Now we go to the card. And, of course, we've got Systemic Racism starring Paul Zerzan. And I did look up Paul's case on the Civil Service Commission, and the Civil Service Commission ordered an investigation into Paul Zerzan's whistleblower complaint. So I'd have to say that that's probably good news. I've got McNinch versus the Board of Education. This brings us right back to John Fernandez. I've got Tony Babauta versus Trump. I've got the governor versus mothers, Friedman versus Bill 291, and Talena versus Vanessa. Now, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, the whole abortion controversy kind of dominates the news today. So we're going to be spending a lot of time on that. I'm not finished with the insular cases, SSI, and all of that sort of thing. And I've got one item on the card today dealing with that. It requires a lot more discussion. The Supreme Court leak on the abortion case is extremely important and requires a whole lot more coverage, which will happen. But, you know, putting together the calendar is a challenge. You know, there are some things that are more important than other things. There are some things that are perishable. If you don't do it today, forget it, because they're perishable. There are other things that have a much longer shelf life. There are some things that are really interesting, some things not so interesting, but kind of need to be covered because they're important. Important doesn't always mean interesting. So as I put the calendar together, I try to weigh all of these challenges. And of course, the calendar, the card, is driven by local events, by the newspapers, by the TV stations, by what's happening nationally, what I feel like talking about. Sometimes even Ray's show has a bearing on what we talk about on Tall Tales. So we'll plunge into the calendar today. And of course, first item on the calendar is who screwed up on the public law 3634, and no one did. But I did see the notice of meeting for the Civil Service Commission on the agenda, and the Civil Service Commission can get a lot of stuff wrong, but they get this agenda part really, really well. They do it exactly the way it should be done. So if you're a director and you want to know how it's done, take a peek at the way the Civil Service Commission does it. All right, next I've got McNinch versus Fernandez, and I've got an article here from the PDN, which I'll go through, and then we'll come back and I'll fill in some of the gaps. The Education Board discussed implementing policy for the participation of transgender athletes in school sports during a work session on Wednesday. I got to stop here and reach for the Pacific Island Times and turn to my favorite columnist in the Pacific Island Times. You know who that is, don't you, Jose?
He kind of looks like you.
Yeah, he does. And, yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's available at Payless and other stores. And the title of it is A Fairy Tale About Rugby and the Wokesters. And there's one part here that I read before. I'm going to read it again. What are little boys made of? Frogs and snails and puppy dog tails. That's what little boys are made of. What are little girls made of? Sugar and spice and all that's nice. That's what little girls are made of. So I learned that probably when I was 8 or 9 years old, not because I thought it was so good, but because it was so easy to remember. And I would advance it as a truism, that boys and girls are not the same. And being a conservative, I will tell you that a girl can never be a boy and a boy can never be a girl. And I don't care how badly you mangle the language, it doesn't change things. Calling a man a cisgender male doesn't make him any more of a man than if you just said he's male. So here we are. The Guam Board of Education discussed implementing a policy for the participation of transgender athletes in school sports during a work session on Wednesday. Board members shared their views regarding a transgender athlete playing on a female high school rugby team. Currently, there are no board policies regarding team membership for transgender athletes participating in school. So what I just talked about is the forefront of this column, right? Transgender is the key word here. We're not talking about boys and girls. We're talking about transgender, something that only exists in people's minds. In the absence of a board policy, the superintendent is allowed to address the matter, and based on that authority, Superintendent John Fernandez took action. Now, this is what the reporter thinks. This is not attributed to any source or anything like that. The reporter has decided that in the absence of board policy, the superintendent can act.
No quotes from anybody. That's just his fact.
That's his rule.
Or hers.
Yeah.
Theirs.
The reporter has just decided that's the way it is. And then Superintendent John Fernandez took action. Well, I'm going to say the paper's wrong. You know, in the absence of a board policy, the superintendent does whatever he can to maintain the status quo until the board can act. Last month, GDOE issued a letter stating that neither Interscholastic Sports Association bylaws nor Guam Rugby Union rules address the participation of transgender athletes. Seems kind of simple to me then. You know, that in the absence of a board policy, the board policy is we aren't dealing with that. Introducing new conditions and restrictions after the start of this semester's season would violate Title IX, which prohibits discrimination in interscholastic sports, according to Fernandez.
Wrong.
Yeah, so you're resigning, John? Maybe you'll have time to do a little more reading after you quit.
9.
Yeah. So, you know, he trots out this, Title IX, you guys. Quote, in our bylaws, when it comes to rugby, we do require the rugby union to submit its rules for the season prior to the commencement of the season. He said, we did subsequently receive a reference from the World Rugby Guidelines, but that came after the start of the season, not according to Josh Walsh. So it presents a separate challenge. Last month, the rugby union decided to not allow any transgender athletes to compete for the remainder of the Interscholastic Sports Association high school rugby season due to safety concerns. I'm going to translate that into English for the tailgaters out there. Last month, the Guam Rugby Union decided to not allow any boys to compete in the girls' rugby games for the remainder of the season. But this is a classic example of cultural Marxism. You fiddle with the language. You change the meaning of things by changing the words that you use to identify them. And pretty soon you've got people thinking that there actually was a change. That you take a large strapping, like you could take somebody like me, some giant like me, and put me out in the rugby field and dress me properly and say, oh, that's our transgender rugby player.
Since you're a giant, Bob,
Yeah.
you would be trans-species.
Trans-species.
And there's nothing that prohibits trans-species in the language.
Absolutely, yeah. So by changing the language, the cultural Marxists are changing the way people think. And, you know, if you look for a guy named Benjamin Lee Whorf, a famous linguist, 60 or 70 years ago, he would tell you today, he wouldn't have said this then, but, you know, your brain is like a computer. And computers have operating systems. And the language that you use is the operating system for that computer. Now, the default operating system is your mother tongue that you don't have to learn. You get that free. But you can change that operating system by downloading new terms and new ways of thinking about things into that operating system. And that's exactly what the cultural Marxists are doing. So don't think in terms of boys and girls. Think in terms of transgenders and cisgenders and non-binaries. The one you came up with, Jose, non-binary.
I identify.
The guys down at Touray thought that was hilarious. You really scored some points there. Yeah, and Fernandez and this reporter have fallen into the trap. They're modifying their language and therefore modifying their thought processes. If 5 years ago I would ask John Fernandez, under what condition should a boy be able to play rugby in a girls' rugby game? Well, never. I mean, we don't do that. Girls, it's a girls' game. Boys play with boys. But you add in the word transgender, and you start warping thought processes till now, oh, well, what are we going to do? We have a transgender here. We got to have a policy about how to deal with transgenders. And it's now before the Board of Education.
I think what they're trying to forget here, or try not to discuss, is that we have two defining factors. You know, we're not talking about the word boy and girl. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the term male and female, and that terminology is called sex.
Exactly.
Biology.
Yeah.
But you won't hear any of this in this discussion.
No, absolutely not, because of the phenomenon that I just described. Being woke means that your thought process has been corrupted by the changes in the language, and you embrace the changes, you broadcast them, you accept them, you celebrate them. All right, so going on. Last month, the rugby union decided not to allow any transgender athletes to compete for the remainder of the season. In addressing the issue, Education Board Chairman Mark Mendiola said he thinks that the board should follow the Title IX law. So do I, Mark. But see, the difference in your approach to following Title IX and my approach to following Title IX is I know what it says, and you don't. However, board member Ron McNinch said if the board and department followed Title IX, he believes that following the rules is important. It will lessen the voices of young women and girls. Well, what happened to you, McNinch? You know better.
Again, remove title and just say 9.
Yeah. And now we got the opportunity for a little virtue signaling here on the part of McNinch. I was an athlete in college, and I strongly value sports. I feel strongly about women in sports and sports for girls, said McNinch. I think this discussion is important. I'm worried that our women and girls are being discriminated in these policies. Board member Robert Chrysostomo agrees with McNinch. It's safety. Let's keep safety in mind. And if we're going to have a girls' sport with a transgender participating, it's an uneven playing field. He said, I don't care what anyone says. That person grew up as a male with hormone changes, and that's why the girls are complaining. We don't know if he's had any hormone changes or not. That's why the girls are complaining, although Chrysostomo said he supports inclusion. Come on, Robert. He believes, and you know, everybody does this because they don't want to make anybody mad. You know, the 1 in 500 people that would get mad if you don't understand inclusion. So you got to pussyfoot around and embrace the silliness that comes with this whole walkism instead of doing what your job is. You're on the Board of Education, Robert. He believes that in order for the sport to be fair, there should be a balance of team members. Now we go from the ridiculous to the ridiculouser here. If one transgender athlete were to play on the field, there should be another out in the field either on the same or opposite team.
No. This isn't algebra. You know what? Actually, what makes this more frustrating? It sounds like a group of scientists sitting together discussing if the Earth is flat or not.
Exactly.
In 2022.
It does. It does. Well, you know, Mark Twain came up with a lot of really interesting sayings. As an example, Mark Twain once upon a time said, the coldest winter in my life was a summer I spent in San Francisco. Youth is such a wonderful thing. It's a pity that it's wasted on the young. He also said, in the beginning, God invented school boards. This was just for practice. Then he invented idiots. And here we go. You know, this guy who, according to one tweet that I saw, is 6 feet tall and a powerful runner, powerful player, has caused them all to have mental diarrhea. The Education Board, Department, and Board will also be watching the remaining rugby games of the season and will continue to discuss the matter further with a policy in place before the upcoming school year. Now, there's more to this. I went through it yesterday. The Post had a really good article, finally. They covered all the bases, but the reason that this came before the board in the working session yesterday was because board member Rod McNinch raised hell. Ron McNinch said, I was in Saipan, I saw this in the paper, and I said, hey, what about the board? No consultation with the board, no board action. This is not right. And then he wrote to Mark Mendiola, the chairman, and said, we need to have a board meeting. Mendiola scheduled a working session for yesterday, and you would have thought in the working session maybe they could have read Title IX. Or counsel could have brought him up to speed on Title IX.
Or at least Candid News.
Or at least Candid News, yeah. So they scheduled a working session yesterday and the meeting to tomorrow. Now, a board member ought to be protecting his own turf. You have a board of, how many is it, 9 people now? And the reason is that the idea is that you get a higher quality of decision when you have a collaborative board that works in a collegial manner than if you have a single person making the decisions. Well, that's what you wound up with. You wound up with John Fernandez making a decision without any regard for his board whatsoever. If he had to make a quick decision, it should have been apologetically. I had to make a decision. I have to make a decision now. I will do the best I can, remembering that the board will have the final call on this. But Fernandez just waded in there and said, we're looking forward to an inclusive, competitive season. You can't have both. You can't let the boys play and have a competitive season because the girls are not as good at rugby as the boys are. Footnote, the girls will never be as good as the boys are at rugby. All right, let's take a break here, and we'll come back to Tony Babauta versus Trump.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
We're already Pika's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing The Point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are. picking up with the next item on the card, Tony Babauta versus Trump. And this is a story that ran in the Daily News. Overturn of landmark abortion ruling could end legal abortion on Guam. Most forms of abortion on Guam would be rendered illegal should the U.S. Supreme Court choose to overturn a landmark court case that established abortion as a constitutional right. That's because Guam already has a law on the books banning abortions. Assistant Attorney General James Canto is not an Assistant Attorney General. He is a Deputy Attorney General, Deputy for Civil Litigation, told lawmakers during a Wednesday public hearing on the Guam Heartbeat Act. An unconfirmed draft opinion was leaked this week suggesting that 5 of the 9 Supreme Court were in favor of overruling the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision that guaranteed the right to an abortion in the United States, the Associated Press reported. An opinion is expected by June or July. That would leave the power to decide in the hands of state and territorial legislatures. And Guam already has a law in the books banning the procedure. It really becomes a blank slate if the court does deliver it back down to the states to say this is the right or not, by which each state can decide whether to grant to its citizens. In 1990, Governor Joseph Atta signed Public Law 20-134, authored by the late Senator Elizabeth Areola, and unanimously passed by members of the 20th Guam Legislature. The measure criminalizes abortion in all cases except when the life of a mother is endangered. Now, for once, we had a reporter who didn't have to say, but does not have an exception for rape or incest. Wonder of wonders. Every person who provides, supplies, or administers to any woman or procures any woman to take any medicine, drug, or substance, or uses or employs any instrument or other means, whatever, with intent thereby to cause an abortion is guilty of a third-degree felony, the law states. Even soliciting a woman for an abortion was criminalized, and the local abortion law was touted as one of the most restrictive in the entire country. Now, the story says Judge Anita Areola. That's wrong. Anita Areola was never a judge. Anita Sokola was a judge. But Anita Sokola and Anita Areola are two different people. Anita Areola, a lawyer, and Senator Elizabeth Areola's daughter represented several people challenging the abortion law. The then Attorney General, Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, had Janet Benschoof, a member of the American Civil Liberties Union Reproductive Freedom Project, taken to court and charged with a misdemeanor for advising women to fly to Hawaii for abortions, PDN files show. The law was ultimately struck down by the district court as unconstitutional, and the ruling was upheld by the Ninth District Court of Ninth Circuit. Why? Make many mistakes here? Guam PDN? They said Ninth District Court of Appeals, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, after a 6-year legal battle that cost the government of Guam millions of dollars. But the measure was never repealed and remains in the Guam Code annotated, Canto said. Well, it is not being enforced because of Roe versus Wade's precedent would nullify it. Come June, it's anybody's guess. Well, it's not anybody's guess if the Alito draft becomes the law, then that public law becomes the law of the island, a very strict anti-abortion law. Now, Attorney Vanessa Williams. Now, if you've forgotten who Vanessa Williams is, this is what Vanessa Williams said about abortion. It's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. Should I go to the movies, or should I have? I think I'll go to the movies. Where are the pills? Yeah. Attorney Vanessa Williams, a member of the Guam People for Choice, who was also present during Wednesday's hearing, said that lawmakers had to take action on the matter. It's important, in light of the decision that was leaked yesterday, that senators take meaningful action and repeal those bad laws that are on the books.
Bad laws.
Bad laws. You know why she thinks they're bad? She doesn't like them. They don't tie into her narrative of it's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. They're just making, with laws like this, they're just making things complicated for her.
Actually, I think it makes it possible. A ban on abortion makes it possible for her to make a choice.
One less choice. Yeah. Okay. Public Law 130-134 called for a referendum on the anti-abortion law to be held in November 1990. Guam voters were supposed to decide whether to keep the ban. But when District Court of Guam Judge Alex Munson found the matter unconstitutional in August of that year, the referendum was rendered moot, PDN files show. It's unclear what this means for the law. But even without an outright ban on Guam, the Supreme Court overturning the right to abortion could still impact local abortion access. There has been no abortion provider on island since Dr. William, what a strange name, William Freeman, retired in 2018. There was effectively no access to legal abortions on island until an injunction was issued by District Court of Guam Chief Judge Francis Tydenko Gatewood last September, allowing women to seek medication-induced abortions with virtual consultation of a doctor. Tydenko Gatewood upheld arguments from two Hawaii-based doctors who sued the Attorney General, the Guam Board of Medical Examiners, and the Commission on Healing Arts. Physicians Shandini Radu and Bliss Kaneshiro argued that a Guam law requiring women to have in-person consultations before receiving an abortion was unconstitutional because it imposed undue burden on the ability of Guam women seeking the procedure. Now, I've explained this before, but it requires to be told over and over again. Radu and Kaneshiro are OBGYN doctors at the University of Hawaii. They live in Honolulu. But they came out less than a year before this suit was filed, before the American Civil Liberties filed this suit on the chemical abortion law. They were admitted to practice here. Therefore, they had standing to be plaintiffs in the suit. Now, why would two OBGYNs from Honolulu go to all that trouble so that they could do medication abortions on Guam? Is the market that big? Are they so underused in Honolulu that they wanted to start a branch off? No. The reason they came is because Calamity Jane Flores recruited them. We did, the Vigilance Committee did some Sunshine Law digging and found the emails back and forth, and the reason they're here is because Jane Flores brought them out here. You'll recall that Jane Flores is the director of Bureau of Women's Affairs, and the only thing that she really did that got much press at all was hunt for an abortionist for Guam. She did a nationwide search trying to get an abortionist to come to Guam, and this was the best that she could do. We spent a little time with Calamity Jane the other day, who holds herself out as a Catholic. And according to the way we read Catholic doctrine, anyone who does what Calamity Jane has done is, there's a complicated term here, Jose, excommunicated.
Sententi. Latae sententi.
Latae sententi. In other words, it doesn't require any official pronouncement. That is an excommunication. And when one is excommunicated, he is no longer in a state of grace, therefore cannot do the Eucharist at Mass. It's not an irreversible process. One who is excommunicated like that can get back into a state of grace, But until that person does, going through the Eucharist is another bad thing.
And if religion is not your litmus test for integrity, this is the person we're all supposed to trust with women's affairs, who first opined on the Heartbeat Act, saying it's not pro-life. She said, in reference to these doctors we're talking about, quote, "It is also moot legislation because we do not currently have any doctors on Guam who perform abortions or any doctors on Guam that provide medically induced abortions that the Bureau of Women's Affairs is aware of." And she stops there because she doesn't admit she's aware of the off-island medical abortions.
Well, you know, parse the sentence, on island.
On island.
These two are not on island, so...
That's the integrity of this Bureau.
Yeah. And, of course, you know, whenever the question comes up, well, if these people are really pro-life, they'd pay more attention to the children that are born. Well, if Jane is really pro-women, she'd stick up for those rugby players that got mowed down by that guy. But, of course, she didn't say a peep on that because it wouldn't be politically correct for her to do that.
Well, it's not about abortion.
It's not, and it's not about abortion. Why get off the really important subject, you know? Yeah. The Attorney General of Guam subsequently challenged Tydenko Gatewood's decision in the Ninth Circuit, but the case is on hold while the Supreme Court sought its position on abortion in the Dobbs case, which is the big one. Appellants in the Dobbs case seek the overturn of Roe in the 1992 Casey versus Planned Parenthood, which barred states from imposing undue burden on abortion access, defined it as a substantial obstacle in the path of a woman seeking an abortion before the fetus attains viability. A decision in Dobbs will likely have a substantial impact on this court's consideration and analysis of the case, the Office of Attorney General wrote in a motion to pause its appeal until Dobbs is resolved. Okay, so this is all on a particular point, right? It's about abortion. It's about the current, the state of the law on Guam, the statute that may spring back into action depending on how Dobbs goes. And it's all pretty tightly pulled together until we get involved with Tony Babauta. And that's the reason that I classified this as Tony Babauta versus Trump is because of the last paragraph here. The Democratic Party of Guam and Democrats in 53 states and territories issued a statement Tuesday opposing the U.S. Supreme Court's possible strike down of abortion rights. And this is a quote. Now, it doesn't say Tony's name, but Democratic Party. Quote, "The shockwaves of Donald Trump's presidency are neither gone nor forgotten," the Democratic Party of Guam said in its statement. Just like Jane has got to work on abortion, they got to work on Donald Trump. Let's take a short break and we'll come back to Donald Trump.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate with cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want, with your Visa debit card. Brothers put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
right, so here we are. We got about 8 minutes before the big halftime show here. And Tony Babauta got to bring Trump into it, which makes absolutely no sense. It doesn't make his argument any stronger. It doesn't make it any more persuasive. It doesn't make him look any less a fool than he already is, which he seems to come up with new ways to look silly. Now, I know what he is alluding to, and that is that Donald Trump was able to appoint 3 justices to the Supreme Court. So we went from a court that was pretty evenly divided to one where there are now 6, at least 5.5 conservatives on the court, to one that was pretty evenly divided. And people want to blame Trump and the Democrats because anymore we don't consider the Supreme Court, a judicial body. The Supreme Court is just another political adjunct to the executive and the legislative. And you can tell that because of the bitter battles over Supreme Court nominations. So, we have an electoral college that is an indirect way of choosing a president. So when you go to the polls in one of the states and you vote for Donald Trump, the reality is that you're not really voting for Donald Trump. You're voting for an elector. And the electors are all governed by the votes in the states from which they are appointed. So those electors meet in the state capitol, they cast their ballots, they send it to the vice president, and the votes are counted on the 6th of January. Of course, everybody knows who won by the 6th of January anyhow. But it's an indirect system, so that when you're voting for president, you're not really voting for president. Well, we've kind of got the same thing now when it comes to Supreme Court decisions, because the game now is that a president will appoint someone whose political philosophy is in line with his own. And members of the other party will do the best they can to destroy that person so that the appointing president does not have more votes on the Supreme Court, just kind of like the Electoral College. And it's really sad. A little historical background here, and of course I'm going to blame the Democrats for this, which is right. But there was a time when appointments to the Supreme Court were not that controversial. Occasionally there was a controversy about someone not being too qualified. If you remember Hainsworth and Carswell in the Johnson administration, but very seldom. And historically, sometime back in the day, a judge would be appointed on Monday, and the Congress had confirmed, the Senate would confirm on Tuesday. It just wasn't that hard fought. But this all changed in the 1980s thanks to Ted Kennedy, a senator, and a senator named Joe Biden. Because President Reagan appointed perhaps the most qualified person ever to be appointed to the Supreme Court. And those two guys, with the help of some other Democrats, borked him. Yeah.
That became a verb.
That became a verb, yeah. They borked him. And they weren't content with just attacking his, they tried to cancel him out, to make him, to ruin him, destroy him. And they followed the same pattern with Clarence Thomas, who, believe it or not, should not have had any trouble at all. He's a person of color. And they did the same thing to him. When the hearings were over, they somehow found Anita Hill, who had worked with Thomas in a couple different government agencies, followed him from one agency to another, and the reports were there'd never been any enmity between them. And Anita Hill didn't accuse him of any sex crimes. She accused him of inappropriate language. And once again, those same guys tried their best to destroy Clarence Thomas, the best justice on the Supreme Court right now. So they set the ground rules. So Mitch McConnell was in the Senate for the Borking even. And he kind of made a promise to himself that if he ever were involved, this would never, ever happen again. So when Merrick Garland came along, and during the end of the Obama administration, almost a year to go at the end of the Obama administration, Mitch was the Senate Majority Leader. And Mitch didn't even schedule Merritt for a hearing on his appointment.
Thank God.
And when it came down, I kind of stood back and looked at it. I said, the guy seems to be okay. He's the chief judge of the D.C. Circuit, got good credentials, seems to be smart enough. Yeah, he's a liberal, but, there are liberals and then there are liberals, so it might not be that bad to confirm the guy. But, yeah, like you say, boy, was I wrong. When he had a chance to show his true colors as the Attorney General, we saw what we would have gotten. I'm going to continue this, come back with Tony Babauta, and then we'll go to Lou Leon Guerrero and Mother's Day.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Stepping up security at the High Court. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Crews working late into the night in Washington, erecting a non-climbable security fence around the U.S. Supreme Court building 2 days after a draft opinion was leaked.
Associate Justice Samuel Alito was slated to appear at a judicial conference today, but Reuters reports he canceled his appearance. Justice Clarence Thomas and the court's Chief Justice John Roberts are also scheduled to attend, although it's unclear if they too will choose not to appear. Alito's cancellation comes after days of often intense protests outside the court and nationwide, sparked by Politico's publication of his draft opinion calling for the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Fox's Sean Lanchel in Washington. Tornadoes have torn a path through eastern Oklahoma, hitting the town of Seminole.
Tornado blew right through downtown Seminole. This is off Main Street. Businesses lining the street here. Destroyed, damaged, trees are uprooted, power lines are down.
Reporter Sarah Smith of Fox 25 in Oklahoma City. Since then, up to 8 inches of rain has fallen, triggering a flash flood watch for most of eastern Oklahoma. Another tornado has destroyed homes and businesses in Lafayette, Texas, northwest of Fort Worth. In Atlanta, a fatal confrontation between a police officer and a suspect.
There was some discussion going on, and then immediately there was a struggle. The struggle involved the officer's gun. The struggle went on for several minutes. At the conclusion of that struggle, the officer discharged his firearm, and the suspect was transported to a local hospital.
Atlanta's Police Chief Charles Hampton says the suspect later died. The officer now on administrative leave as the investigation begins. Former President Trump's oldest son has appeared in private before the House Select Committee investigating the incursion at the U.S. Capitol building last year. Donald Trump Jr. attended a rally in Washington that preceded the march to the Capitol. America is listening to Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate with cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want with your Visa debit card. Brothers put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
Some Republican lawmakers taking steps to dissolve the new disinformation board at the Department of Homeland Security.
The bill introduced by GOP Senator Josh Hawley is really top to bottom. Not only would it dissolve the disinformation board, it would ensure the board could never be reestablished, prevent DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas from using other parts of Homeland Security to censor information, and it would also require Mayorkas to turn over all documents, written or recorded, on exactly how the board was established in the first place. Meantime, during a Senate Homeland Security hearing, Secretary Mayorkas doubled down on the disinformation board, saying the new department is actually meant to ensure our free speech.
Fox's Trace Gallagher reports Secretary Mayorkas says he didn't properly describe the Disinformation Governance Board when he revealed its existence to lawmakers last week. Officials at the Biden administration say they've begun expelling Cubans and Nicaraguans to Mexico under the pandemic-related powers that deny migrants a chance to seek asylum, expanding the use of the rule known as Title 42, even as the White House has been trying to end it. Secretary of State Antony Blinken testing positive for COVID-19, said to be mildly symptomatic and isolating. In Tacoma, Washington, a candy store owner accused of stabbing a homeless person to death with a sword.
Cops say the clerk told them he slashed the homeless woman to death because he was tired of her hanging around the shop. Police say that when they got to the scene, the woman was already dead, the suspect gone. But they say he later turned himself in. Police say the man killed the woman just one day after his release from a hospital where he'd been treated for mental health issues. Advocates say violence against the homeless is increasing in the United States. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hafa. I'm the owner of Guam's largest tourist attraction group. The pandemic's been very tough for all of us, and particularly for my team members. So I'm really appreciative and grateful for the PUA assistance to our team members, and more recently, the SVOG federal grant that allowed us to reopen these facilities and re-employ everyone at a critical time when PUA ended. From myself and my team, on behalf of all of us, thank you for the federal funds that allowed us to reopen.
The federal fund you provide saved many, many jobs. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We employ about 35 technicians for our shows. Thank you for the federal funds. It kept us going.
Thank you for helping with the federal funds.
Thank you for the federal funds.
Thank you for helping to save our jobs.
Thank you for the federal funds.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Hafa. Patsy Gogri from Security Title here with information about what a title company does. The title side of our business determines who owns a property and guarantees your ownership with a title insurance policy. The escrow side acts as an independent third party, managing the transfer of money and documents between the buyer, seller, lenders, and others. Security Title has a management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
So here we are, a big halftime show, Tall Tales, a great show every single day, including tomorrow, which is Friday, which Jose and I are not looking forward to, but we got to do what we got to do. During the break, Jose got me and opened up my screen so I could see as you were YouTube comments. So comment away, and I'll be able to see them now. I wrapped up with more foolishness from Tony Babauta. Everybody else talking about abortion, and Tony's got to bring Donald Trump's name into it because Donald Trump made some appointments to the Supreme Court. And I gave you the historical framework here of why the Supreme Court has become so politicized and is really in a poor position to depoliticize itself so long as the Senate holds the confirmation hearing and as so long as pro-abortion Democrats are in the Senate. Because that's what these confirmation hearings were about. Whether it was Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, Gorsuch, it didn't matter. They were about abortion. And what the Democrats wanted the nominees to do is say, I will not overrule Roe versus Wade. And these are the kind of questions that you shouldn't ask a nominee to a court. Once upon a time, we were looking for courts that were impartial, with judges that didn't climb up on the bench with preconceptions as to how they should rule on various social issues. But the Democrats have pretty well trashed that, and here's Tony right here.
You know what's interesting is that a lot of the criticisms that is going on about this leak and the content of the leak is this is going to undermine democracy. Well, the way that this happened is through democracy. President Trump was voted in. Yeah. All these other people were voted in. These got changed through the process, not by activist judges, but by the process of democracy, and the way they look at it.
And those who scream about democracy, who get favorable Supreme Court rulings like Roe, don't want to face up to the fact that the court is not democratic at all.
Period.
It is the non-democratic part of our government, and that's why in the draft opinion of Alito's opinion, he says, well, let it go back to the states where it belongs.
And that's where you find your quote-unquote democracy then.
Exactly.
That they're searching for.
Yeah, but the Democrats aren't interested in democracy. They're interested in abortion. And that's, it's pretty hard, I think, to be a Democrat and not be pro-abortion. Okay, I've got somebody in the green room here. It is Donna Mila wants to talk about abortion. Go ahead, Donna Mila.
Good afternoon, Uncle Bob and Jose. Love to answer you. I'm calling in because former Senator Carlotta Leon Girl identified me as an expert because I am a woman and I manage my house. So I also wanted to put my expert opinion out there about the arguments that these pro-elective abortionists use. And the first one is my body, my choice. The other one is you can't legislate my vagina. Sorry, I had to say that because that's what they said. If that is true, then why do they accept the rules and regulations out there that exist in society that prevents people from placing themselves in situations that could cause a loss of one's own life or even maim them? For example, a person who decides to commit suicide cannot go to a doctor and say, kill me. Neither can a construction worker on a construction site decide to continue working in dangerous conditions that could cause death or bodily harm. A pregnant woman is prohibited from flying in the third trimester just because she made a decision to continue her pregnancy. Lastly, their decision claiming that it is their constitutional right to make is not solely about solely or exclusively about their own body, but that of the body of another human being that is dependent on their bodies to survive. But again, conjoined twins, if one twin is stronger or has more body parts that can be considered hers or whatever, the other twin, she cannot decide for the other twin to kill them because they're dependent on her body. My body, my choice does not have any standing at all. I just wanted to put my expert opinion, despite the lack of formal education in law or formal education in the medical field. Thank you.
Well, we welcome expert opinions. You know, I can't do it all by myself, so I really appreciate it, Donna Mila.
You're welcome. I'm going to continue to listen to the show.
Good deal. All right, so next on the card here is the governor versus mothers. And is Saturday or Sunday Mother's Day? I forgot.
It'll be Sunday.
Sunday is Mother's Day, yeah. All right. And this is I'm looking at something that looks like a card. Half a day. Each year we take the time to thank and celebrate mothers across Guam, those who give us life and believe in us so that we may believe in ourselves. We pay special recognition to the mothers, grandmothers, and figures in our lives who have taught us about the importance of family, loyalty, faith, sacrificing for us in ways that mothers do. We also recognize that many families have lost their mom to Wuhan virus, cancer, heart disease, and other diseases this past year. May God bless their memory, and may this day fall gently on their loved ones. This Mother's Day, let us honor not only our moms, but all mothers whose arms have cradled new generations and whose many gifts have blessed us. Let us learn from moms who have healed us through the unimaginable hardships and brought us unbounded joy and laughter. Let us be inspired by our moms and the unconditional love and strength they have used to shape our lives and hopes. When we support mothers, we support the prosperity, security, and well-being of our entire island. We encourage all the people of Guam to join us in expressing their love, respect, and gratitude to mothers everywhere. We send our island mothers all of our love, and we wish you good health and great happiness. Happy Mother's Day. Signed by Lulian Guerrero and Joshua F. Tenorio. What beautiful sentiments, huh?
I want to say something really sarcastic, but this is just sad.
You may have leave to say something really sarcastic, Jose.
63 million souls of aborted babies are not impressed.
No. Yeah, well, I think there's a special dispensation for hypocrisy when it comes to Mother's Day, huh? All right.
Well, we know who's not part of the in crowd. Those terminated for death in the womb.
Absolutely. So then I go on to a story in the Post that has, let me show this to our audience here. Yeah, this is Miss I Really Love Mothers right here. I should have printed it in color. Yeah. The Post, into the dark ages, Supreme Court ruling could revive Guam law making abortion a felony crime. A 32-year-old law that makes providing or attempting to receive an abortion a crime and later declared null and void through the federal court system could once again be enforced locally if a draft U.S. Supreme Court decision becomes final. That leaked decision would strike down Roe v. Wade, a landmark 1973 case in which the United States that resulted in the same court ruling that the Constitution protects a pregnant woman's right to have an abortion without excessive government restriction. The Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision 1992 largely maintained the right. But the recently leaked draft of the Supreme Court decision could overrule both Roe and Casey. The Constitution does not prohibit the citizens of each state from regulating or prohibiting abortion. The draft obtained by Politico concludes, Roe and Casey arrogated that authority. We now overrule those decisions and return that authority to the people and their elected representatives. What a horrible idea. Governor Leon Guerrero said overturning the long-standing case law would be a big event that will negatively affect women's lives and reproductive choices. I fear for us going back into the dark ages. I fear for the ability of women to get safe, hygienic, and medical abortions, taking away very sacred decisions about our body. It's very sad. The worst decision the Supreme Court could make. Now, let's stop here and hypothesize a little bit. There's a guy named Immanuel Kant, who I always refer to as Kant, who came up with a philosophical principle called the categorical imperative, which is really heavy-duty language and hard to remember. But basically what he said, live your life, conduct your affairs in such a manner that the way you do things would be imperative for every other person. Sort of an inside-out golden rule. So if you say I don't steal, then what you're doing is you're mandating that nobody else steal. The so-called categorical imperative. Well, if we applied that to Lou, there would be no mothers, right? If mothers should have the ability to abort their children, then every mother should abort. Well, it's bending the categorical imperative a little bit, but you see what I'm driving at. If what Lou wants is carried to the ultimate extreme, there will be no mothers. Because if no matter how many times you were pregnant, if you had an abortion every time, you ain't a mother. Yeah, I fear we're going back into the dark ages. And, talk about dark ages. If you read up history on some of the people at some of the tribes and people and groups and clans, etc., used to have something called sacrifice, where they used to sacrifice babies to their gods. Yeah, the Dark Ages. The Office of the Attorney General confirmed to lawmakers Wednesday that should the leaked decision be adopted by the court, an existing but currently unenforced law that criminalizes abortions would go back into effect. Jamie Canto, a Deputy Attorney General, told him that. He was appearing before the legislature during a public hearing on Bill 291, the Heartbeat Act, which allows private citizens to bring civil action against a doctor performing an abortion on a fetus with a heartbeat. But Guam's proverbial slate isn't blank, far from it. I guess I'll narrow the question, Chris Duenas told Canto. My research shows that Guam law currently is that abortion is illegal on Guam. In response, Canto confirmed a statute that makes abortion a crime locally hasn't been repealed, but instead hasn't been enforced because of Roe versus Wade. Public Law 30-134, enacted in March of 1990, makes abortion a felonious act for doctors and medical professionals. Every person who provides, supplies, or administers to any woman or procures any woman to take any medicine, drug, or substance, or uses or employs any instrument or other means whatever with intent thereby to cause an abortion of such woman is guilty of a third-degree felony, the law states. Mothers could face criminal penalties for seeking an abortion, as well as taking drugs to induce abortion or submitting to an attempt to cause an abortion. Every woman who solicits of any other person any medicine, drug, substance, etc., is guilty of a misdemeanor, the Guam law says. The law was struck down as unconstitutional by Guam's U.S. District Court. The Ninth Circuit eventually upheld the ruling, but lawmakers never acted afterwards, keeping the law on the books, yet ignoring it. Duenas asked, here's Chris Duenas, going right to the heart of it. asked Jane Flores, the director of the Bureau of Women Affairs, what efforts the governor's administration has made to address the decades-old abortion ban. Flores was attending the hearing to oppose 291. Given the current quote, given the current climate of the legislature, we decided that it would not have been a prudent or productive avenue. Prudence, productivity.
Did that really come out of her mouth?
That's what she said. Prudent or productive avenue, given the current climate of the legislature. But Vanessa Williams, we all know who Vanessa is, a local attorney who opposes the Heartbeat Act, said in light of the leaked decision, Guam's lawmakers should take meaningful action and repeal those bad laws that are on the books. Well, go ahead. Governor, you can introduce legislation. Send over your bill. Hope that the Juan Pat 10 phenomenon kicks in. It can be passed within 2 hours of arrival. That's not going to happen. You know why, Jose? They all want to be against abortion, but none of them want to come out and really take the blame for it. They've attracted the heartbeat of 17 different reasons. But as you always point out, the one thing they leave out is the baby. They never talk about the baby. Okay, although the Supreme Court validated the leaked decision through a news release, but stressed that it is still in the process of being drafted. Quote, although the document described in yesterday's news report is authentic, it does not represent a decision by the court or the final position of any member on the issues in the case, the court stated. Leon Guerrero said she was interested in reading what any dissenting justices may write in the case. Of course. And taking away a great protection for our rights as women to make decisions about our bodies and ourselves. It's very personal. It's very private. And they're taking that legal protection from women, the governor said. The Guam Daily Post also requested comments on the leaked decision from Delegate Michael San Nicolas and former Governor Felix Camacho, both of whom are seeking to be elected governor. San Nicolas did not respond to the Post messages, while Camacho's campaign said it would defer any comment until a formal and final decision is released by the Supreme Court. So, Biba Ha'anin Manina, Happy Mother's Day. When we support mothers, we support the prosperity, security, well-being of our entire island. You know, this card, once again, Jose, makes me think that I should have a survival kit here behind the mic, constituting, among other things, anti-emetics. Because reading this, along with her stance on mothers with babies in their wombs, it's enough to make a person look for the anti-emetic.
What'd you say about the two faces?
Yeah, you know, there's only two things I don't like about Governor Lulian Guerrero. Only two things. Her face. All right, we had a caller that got impatient.
We're just curious of what does reading the dissenting opinion do to her opinion?
Validates. I'm not the only person that's this kooky, because even Sonia Sotomayor agrees with me, right? Yeah. Okay. Next, we've got Friedman versus Bill 291. And you know, I have strong opinions about just about everything, including about having strong opinions. I don't like this. Well, you know, I'm a moderate, and I try to see both sides and
integrity.
Yeah, and I don't want to say anything bad about them. And we'll head to Wrigley Field and come back to Dr. Friedman.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Here we go. Wrigley Field, the seventh inning stretch. That means just 2 more innings at Tall Tales today. I had a chance to peek at the comments during the seventh inning stretch. I want to comment on some of the comments. So Booney Dog Chamorro asks, is James Canto, his real name is Jamie Canto, is James Canto let's see, where did that go? The same person who was a jurist in the Superior Court? Yeah, he was a judge. He resigned the judgeship, he left, and he came back, and now he's a deputy attorney general for civil litigation. Donna Mila says, for 2 years and counting, Governor Leon Guerrero executed mandates that violated our constitutional rights, a decision that put us in the dark ages.
It put us backwards in time.
Yeah, all of those checkpoints were Fourth Amendment seizures. No probable cause, etc. Okay. And then Jose Guamiz says, Tobias Tyson's testimony was outstanding. I did watch last night, and it was, man. He really laid it out.
And he even made sure some senators stayed awake.
Exactly. Yeah. And then he says, Dr. Bordalio's testimony was terrible. She was whining the whole time and put emphasis on the women who can't pay for that service. Can't pay for that service. The media on Guam, as you were, holy mac, a reflection of how corrupt these doctors are. And I remarked myself, that was terrible. It's like she really didn't want to even say anything, kind of leaning around there, couldn't even sit up straight and look at the panel. Just too superior for the whole thing. And let's see. Governor Leon Guerrero got elected because of 2 points. The media on Guam refused to cover the issues of abortion and their zeal to have the first female governor. There's probably a lot of truth to that. The Ray Tenorio gun show was a self-inflicted wound. Dr. Bordalio's testimony was hilariously upsetting. She whined the whole time. Guamiz goes on to say, Senator was falling asleep last night, according to Tobias.
They were there for a long time, but
yeah.
I don't think the panel's a good place to take your nap.
Probably not. Okay, so before the break, I was talking about I'm not objective. This show is not objective. Don't look for me giving equal weight to both sides, et cetera. This is my analysis of current trends, and I tell you what I think is going on, and I tell you what I think ought to be done. And I really don't have a whole lot of patience for these neutral, moderate, on-the-fence types who say, well, I didn't like it, but, I think he had a good point. Or like the coach at Tejan High, who says, but I got to think of safety after he goes through all of the really nice, I'm a really woke guy, If you have something on your mind, you really ought to come out and say it. But we're going to play against type here because I've got an article in the Post, and it's called A Neutral View on Proposed Bill 291.
Can I just preference with a saying I think that pretty much encapsulates this for me?
Mm-hmm.
It's like those people down south during the Civil War times who say, I'm not against slavery. I think everyone should own one.
Right.
This is not a neutral article.
No, and that's why I went through that little beep beep to get to the point. It's a Dr. Friedman letter to the editor, and the Post says it's a neutral view on proposed 291. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. I have neither party nor religious affiliation, and hence consider myself a valid neutral voice on the subject of proposed Bill 291. I do not advocate abortion. But consider it very necessary in our society.
Sounds like an advocate's words.
I do not advocate abortion, but I consider it very necessary in our society. No! Yeah. I'm not going to diagnose you with cancer, but you really are very seriously ill. Chemotherapy is recommended. Firstly, let me state, if people wish to have children, by all means, it's their right. Wow. I never thought of that, Jose. This guy's got a mind like a steel trap. And I do not wish to address the right of those who choose not to have children for whatever reason, nor that it should be the right to a personal choice and not prohibited by a government pushed by religious fanatics. Religious fanatics, too. 1, revert a woman to the dark ages of not having any control over her body, a tenet of all primitive religions. Man, this guy is so new. Why doesn't he just come out and say what he's on his mind? Yeah. Should it be the right and not prohibited by a government pushed by religious fanatics to, number 2, disproportionately punish the poor who lack the ability to access cessation of pregnancy off island. Access cessation of pregnancy off island. Nor prohibited by a government pushed by religious fanatics. Number 4, change the concept of a human being to apply a definition of to apply a definition to a ball of cells or a mass of tissue.
This is not a biologist, right?
No.
He's what kind of doctor?
He's an oncologist.
Okay. But the fetus is not a human being.
No.
Wow.
But this is a neutral now. He's being neutral on the bill, right? Nor prohibited by a government pushed by religious fanatics to 5, increase the strain and costs on social services already under severe strain by allowing babies to be born instead of aborting them.
So cancer treatment is cheap.
Yeah. And not prohibited by a government pushed by religious fanatics to 6, regulate the very young to a life already limited by bringing a child into the world. So there should be a means test, according to Friedman. You fill out a bunch of papers and you're interviewed, and if you can't satisfy the interviewer that you could provide the right kind of care for the child, you get a free abortion. And this will lessen the strain and cost on social services. 7, increase the population when overpopulation is the driver of so many problems on Earth, including global warming. Now, for someone who's neutral, man, this guy kind of seems like he's in favor of abortion, doesn't he, Jose? These facts are indisputable and have already been addressed numerous times, but what I wish to discuss is what I have seen as a physician in the age when abortions were illegal across the country.
A physician. Change the concept of a human being to apply a definition of a ball of cells or a mass of tissue. Okay, just want to clarify again.
Yeah.
I don't think I believe my ears the first time.
Yeah, that's right. And, he has 7 points that should not be prohibited by a government pushed by religious fanatics. Push to increase the population when overpopulation is the driver of so many problems on Earth, including global warming. So this is,
unless you're receiving treatment for cancer.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you take his reasoning to the ultimate point. And, I just gave you this hypothetical that a woman, there should be a means test for giving birth. You fill out a bunch of papers, you show some pay stubs and things like that, and you're interviewed. And if you can't satisfy the interviewer that the baby that you're carrying is going to have the right life, according to what the government's decided, you're on your way to a free abortion. And if we're going to do that for babies, we ought to really do it for old people too, right? Now, someone my age, maybe I've got 7, 8 more really good years left. Maybe not. Maybe I only got 1. Maybe this is it. It's hard to say. So let's say that I came down with a serious but curable disease. Shouldn't we figure out how much that would cost and then net it out against the value of the rest of my life?
That's the equation.
Yeah. And, if it would cost, let's say a kidney transplant, if it cost $500,000 for a kidney transplant, keeping me around for another 10 years is damn sure not worth $500,000. So what we would do then, we would send me to the disassembly plant. I would be euthanized, and whatever is still usable on this whole bag of bones that I still navigate around would be used by other people. Isn't that the way we should do things? Seems right to me. Well, it doesn't, but I think that's kind of where Dr. Friedman would lead us if given the ability to do so. Okay, I've got our Keith on the line on Dr. Friedman and abortion, and then we got Frenchie, who probably wants to talk about Cinco de Mayo, no doubt. Yeah, okay, our Keith, let him have it.
Where to begin? Aside from the fact that I dispute his, quote, facts and would love an opportunity to go one-on-one. But there's an old saying that when someone is speaking or writing, everything that comes before the word but is bullshit. And I think this is a classic case of it.
Yeah.
He is a clear advocate and manages to pull out everything and throw it against the wall. I'm surprised he didn't manage to fit Ukraine and Disney in there.
And Donald Trump.
Yes, and Donald Trump. And white supremacy. He actually veers into something I was talking to a friend about last night, with his clump of cells comment. One of the more aggravating things I find about leftists is their inconsistency, their double think. I mean, Orwell really nailed it. The ability to hold two contrary positions in their mind and justify it to themselves at the same time. And pretty much every topic, they do that with just about every political topic. But on abortion, they really do seem to have outdone themselves. Apparently we're all biologists now, and they finally recognize that there are women. I guess that's a step in the right direction. But a few weeks ago, we couldn't define a woman. Men could get pregnant too, or something. One of my favorites is is it a baby or isn't it a baby? It's throwing trillions at prenatal care to protect the mother and her child. And should a pregnant woman get, God forbid, be the victim of a crime, and the fetus dies, well, then the suspect gets charged with its murder as well. But, if at that same period, if she hadn't been stabbed and decided that very day to go to an abortion clinic, well, that's fine. See, then it's a blunt clump of cells. So it seems that whether or not it's a life all depends on who's ending it.
It's almost like quantum mechanics. You don't know until you observe it.
Well, yes, which gets to what I like to call it, Schrodinger's fetus.
Yeah, that's great, Keith. Schrodinger's fetus. The fetus is both alive and dead at the same time.
Yes, exactly. I thought you might enjoy that. But yeah, it's one of the things that is just absolutely wondrous to behold when you bring that out. And in the rare occasion that I do decide to discuss the subject with people whom I don't know are on my side, it's just wonderful to watch the brain cramping up by the facial expressions. Anyway, you feel free to use.
I will always cite you. I'm going to give you a trademark on that one, Keith. That was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, good talking to you. Okay, we're going to go to Churchill Downs. I suspect that the folks are probably drinking margaritas and smacking the pelota, what's that thing called?
Piñata.
Yeah, the piñata, and just having a great old time celebrating Cinco de Mayo. And then from Churchill, we'll get Frenchie to come in and join the party at Churchill Downs.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Check out the newest hydro and garden center to hit Guam, Crop King Hydro. We have a huge selection of plant nutrients, soils, hydroponic mediums, organic pest control pumps, plant support, tools, and so much more. Call 635-4769. 635-GROW. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 to 6 at the Dededo Satina Mall, right across from Payless and Paradise Fitness. For whatever you grow, think Crop King Hydro. Crop King Hydro.
So here we are. I'm still laughing about Schrodinger's fetus. Yeah, here we are, Louisville, Kentucky, Churchill Downs, the home stretch. I can hear the mariachis playing at the big Cinco de Mayo party they're having here at Churchill Downs, and I'm wondering if Frenchie is going to join in and tip a tequila himself. What do you think, Frenchie?
No, there is two things I don't celebrate. One is Cinco de Mayo, and the other one is Bastille Day.
Oh.
It's because they both resulted in the assassination of good rulers. And Cinco de Mayo, it's actually the first time the U.S. engaged in a proxy war against a perceived enemy. And people don't understand is in 1857 until 61, I believe, there was a civil war in Mexico. The leftist already was led by Benito Juarez, and the conservatives were led by Felix Zuloaga. And basically, the conservatives held on to Mexico City. The leftists held on to Veracruz, which is on the coast, on the Atlantic coast. And finally, in 1861, the Juaristas took over Mexico City, and the U.S., who was in the beginning of the Civil War, recognized Juarez's government in exchange for the Mexican granting concession on mining against their debt defaults, because the Mexicans were not paying their debts. And that led to, in November 61, a meeting in London between Spain, France, and Britain, who held most of the debts of Mexico, and they agreed to intervene in Mexico to recover that defaulted debt. And that's how, now, of course, the British always like the other people to do the fighting for them, so they only sent a very small military detachment, and Napoleon III, who was the nephew of the first one, ended up sending a large military operation, and basically by 1862 they controlled all of Mexico. The Mexicans didn't do very much about it. Juarez retreated to his Veracruz area, and basically the Americans didn't do much because they were fighting the Civil War, and the Secretary of State at the time, who was William Henry Seward, S-E-W-A-R-D, didn't want the Europeans to recognize the Confederate. So they were playing a tit-for-tat type of game with the Europeans in order for them not to recognize the Confederate government. And until 1865, where everything changed at the end of the Civil War in the U.S., then the U.S. started arming and sending arms and treasury to Mexico to counter Maximilian, who had arrived in 1864. And Maximilian, who was the only emperor of Mexico, actually came from Austria. He was a Habsburg. He was the younger brother of Emperor Franz Joseph, and he was chosen to be put there because they thought as a Catholic it would be better accepted by the Mexican, but the U.S. didn't see kindly having European powers on its doorsteps, and so they did what they're doing now in Ukraine. They sent arms and treasure to Mexico in order to push Maximilian out of power. And since Maximilian was only support was the French military, when Napoleon decided to retire from Mexico in 1967, then basically everything was over. And that's what the Mexicans celebrate on Cinco de Mayo, which was the end of a siege. where basically Maximilian ended up surrounding his troops, who were not his troops, they were actually French troops. So that's why I don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo. And then Maximilian was executed by firing squad by the Mexicans. And that was the end of intervention of European power in North America, thanks to a proxy war that was financed by the U.S. So then you talk about Barbata and Trump. And basically, Barbata is just following the template of the narrative of the DNC, which is that Trump encouraged white supremacists and racists from all ilks. And that led to January 6th and all those reprobates. And of course, it enabled them to renew their Russia, even though it's been debunked. They keep harping on it, that it is the biggest danger that we have now. And you still have 40% of the people in the U.S. that believe Trump actually was elected thanks to the Russians. So Barbata is doing what the DNC is doing on the mainland. And that leads me to Dr. Samuel Friedman. You know, I read this thing this morning and I had exactly the same reaction that you did. I mean, this guy pretends to be neutral, but he's anything but neutral. He's very anti-Catholic. If you remember, you actually read a piece that I wrote last year against him regarding the way he's treating religious people. And just because he's part of the so-called elected people, he thinks that, every other religion is therefore not as good as his own religion. And he's not even a U.S. citizen. He's a Canadian. And, he's the typical white savior, even though some would argue that Jews are not white, but, he's profoundly anti-Catholic in all his positions. And he keeps pushing the Malthusian theories, which were debunked in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and he's telling us this is real science, and you cannot criticize that point of view. And we have seen that this point of view has been completely debunked, and he's pushing the means test, which can be traced back all the way to segregation laws of the 40s and 50s in the Deep South. And don't forget, he was also pushing for discrimination against people that were not vaccinated. This guy is a very dangerous totalitarian. And he hides behind fake medicine and so-called science, which is been proven totally wrong. And he always portrays himself as some kind of middle of the road, reasonable. But then when the more he goes in his thing, he treats people as complotists, extremists, and so on. He's the same wavelengths that Barbata is regarding Trump. And his arguments come directly from the segregation era in the Deep South and the Malthusian theories. And I would say he's not far at all from all those doctors that were pushing for eugenist theories. This guy is very dangerous. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and we should watch very carefully. I'm planning to write a column against his column in the Post, because he's a dangerous hack.
Boy, you laid it out, Frenchie. I got Johnny Utah holding, so he made some really good points. And thank you so much for the history lesson on the Battle of Puebla. I knew a lot about it, but Puebla, but not as much as you did. So thank you very much for that. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay. Johnny Utah.
Hey, Judge Bob. Real quick, I just wanted to bring up something that's hitting the headlines here in the States in the middle of the night. It's the middle of the night here. But that it's dealing with the Solomon Islands in China, that they've struck a security agreement for troops from China to be sent to the Solomon Islands to maintain their security. And it is raising eyebrows everywhere. New Zealand's Prime Minister just got done talking about it. There is comments coming out of Australia from Scott Morrison, and Prime Minister Manahisan Sagravi, I don't know how to pronounce his name, has basically said that Australia, New Zealand, and the U.S. has now threatened his country's sovereignty because they fear of their decision to make an agreement with China, that if a military base is built in China, there will be an invasion of the Solomon Islands. He's also commenting on the Russian invasion, the Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands, saying that it's illegal what the West is doing to Russia. He also comments on the treatment of Christians in China, saying that everything that the Chinese are doing to its people and the Christians are lies, that they actually treat the Christians really well. So this guy is sounding a little bit off his rocker, this Prime Minister down there in the Solomon Islands.
Yeah, well, I wonder if Michael Bavacqua will be working with him. Thanks for calling, Johnny Utah. See you tomorrow.
Alrighty.
Okay, so here we are again at the end of another perfect day on Tall Tales. It's time for me to say, let's go, Brandon. And we'll see you tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
High security for the high court. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. A large fence erected overnight around the Supreme Court building in Washington, with tempers and rhetoric still flaring over a possible decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Justice Samuel Alito, the author of that leaked draft opinion, was supposed to speak at a judicial conference today. That appearance has been canceled. President Biden blaming Trump supporters.
What are the next things that are going to be attacked? Because this MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history.
Critics claim the White House is seizing on the leak to distract the public from high gas prices and rising interest rates. The Fed boosting its key interest rate by 0.5 percentage point yesterday.
Inflation is much too high, and we understand the hardship it is causing, and we're moving expeditiously to bring it back down.
Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, tough questions yesterday for the Homeland Security Secretary in a congressional hearing.
Louisiana Republican Senator John Kennedy asked DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas who picked Nina Jankowicz to head the new disinformation board, and did he know she'd once called Hunter Biden's laptop Russian disinformation. Mayorkas said,
I was not aware of that. We do not discuss the internal hiring process. Ultimately, it's the secretary responsible for the decisions of the Department of Homeland Security.
Mayorkas said they did not roll out the announcement of this board effectively, but insisted that the board would operate under guardrails meant to protect civil liberties and free speech.
Fox's Jessica Rosenthal. Tornadoes touching down last night in Lafayette, Texas, and then in Oklahoma.
Just to the east of the Oklahoma City metro area, a town called Seminole. Looks like it got hit by a tornado. There was some damage there.
Meteorologist Steve Goss at the National Weather Service. That storm dumped 8 inches of rain on eastern Oklahoma and western Arkansas, triggering flood warnings. America is listening to Fox News.
Get all of your favorite Fox News podcasts ad-free on Apple Podcasts with Fox News Podcasts Plus. From Trey Gowdy, the Fox News Rundown, Will Kane, Brian Kilmeade, and so much more. Go to foxnewspodcasts.com for all the details. The Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day, featuring insight from top newsmakers, reporters, and Fox News contributors. Listen and subscribe now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. New From the Fox News Podcasts Network, Dana Perino, co-host of the 5 and America's Newsroom on Fox News Channel, returns to the world of audio with a new limited-time podcast, Everything Will Be Okay with Dana Perino. Building off the success of her best-selling book of the same name, Dana provides an unequaled brand of advice built on real